Okay, we're on? All right, guys. I'm back. It's probably my second video now that I've posted concerning coronavirus. I typically set this up for my patients. My patients are the type of patients who really like to know why things are working. That's probably why they choose me as their provider, because I like to figure out why things are happening. And over the last week, a lot of information has evolved when it comes to the coronavirus. So I wanted to add more information to the knowledge base out there and at least explain it to on a level that people can understand. That's really important about this virus. So first of all, coronavirus. It's called coronavirus because it's spike-like proteins that surround the virus. It almost makes it look like a crown, and that's Latin for corona. Corona is Latin for crown. And so that's the reason why they call this species of viruses coronavirus, is because of this spike protein. And this specific coronavirus, COVID-10 or COVID-19, actually is a little bit more specialized in using the spike protein to its advantage. So we'll talk about that a little bit down the road to describe how this coronavirus has been taking advantage of so many people with a lot of illness and setting us up in a crises throughout the world. The three things I'm going to cover today is what makes a good host for coronavirus, because viruses can't survive on their own. They actually need a reservoir, and humans tend to be that reservoir. So we need to be a good host for them to establish place in an infection. So you need to be a good host. We're going to talk about what it takes to be a good host for the coronavirus and what it takes to not be a good host. Secondly, we're going to discuss access, how the coronavirus uses this spike protein to get into our cells pretty easily. And last, we're going to talk about how after the virus gets into each cell and infects a cell, it will use some smarts and take over our DNA system and make its own proteins, hijack our own immune system, and set off our immune system into a whirlwind. Those are three things we'll cover today. So first of all, what makes a good host? So when you come to see me as a patient, I always start with the foundation of what keeps us healthy. And what keeps us healthy is balance. And what we're trying to establish when it comes to inflammation is balance. And it takes a good, balanced, healthy mucosal membrane to fight off and ward off any type of intruding bacteria or virus. And so the mucous membranes sort of they line our nasal passage, they line our lung, they line our gut, and other parts of our body. But this is where any type of outside virus is going to come into contact with our inside world. And so it's very important to have a good, healthy mucosal defense to help prevent that virus from taking over and causing an infection. And so this mucosal defense is really important. And so there are things that can affect that mucosal defense. I've written them here. Any type of chronic disease like diabetes, heart disease, liver disease, cancers, autoimmune disease, all those have an effect of how healthy immune responses are going to be, just because they have a different effect, or they have not so robust mucosal lining and mucosal defenses. So they are immunocompromised, meaning that they're more at risk of getting infections. The second thing is poor nutrition. It takes a lot of good, healthy nutrients and food to maintain a good, healthy mucosal membrane. And so, our typical American diet is one of those diets that's too high in sugar. And sugar is one of those things that will just melt that mucosal barrier. And so if we are in the habit of eating too many sugar types of foods, and we don't eat fibers and good fruits and vegetables, we don't build up a good mucosal lining to protect us. So you can just not eat very healthy and be at risk for infections. There's some conditions where you just don't have good mucosal support. Some of these diseases and poor nutrition affect the mucosa, but then there are some other things like IBS and Crohn's and celiac, some localized issues that affect the mucosal membrane. And there's also medications. If you're in the habit of taking ibuprofen on a regular basis, or if you have to take steroids on a regular basis, those are types of medications that also will melt that mucosal lining away. It's not 100%, but it just makes it a little bit less robust to fight off an infection. So those are conditions that actually make it tough to have this nice mucosal defense. And how this mucosal layer works is it provides balance and inflammation in our body. It's at the mucosal layer that our body actually takes this information in on the outside world and will respond with an immune response. So we always want this to be in balance. And so what happens is folks who have these conditions, they tend to put a lot of stress on their inflammation because they don't have very good mucosal support. So if you have a lot of stress on that mucosal, or if you have a lot of stress on your immune system because you have less of a mucosal support, you tend to stay out of balance. And so in order for my patients who come into me with these conditions, our goal to balance out this pressure is basically build up this end of the balanced leverage. And what this end is we want to repair our mucus defense, and we also want to support our mucus defense. And we support inflammation with what's called a T regulatory cell. And so those are my patients who have problems, chronic problems or mucosal issues. I myself have had IBS. So for me, when I feel out of balance with inflammation, I really try and focus on getting my T-regs healthy. That way I can get some balance, so I'm not twisting too far with inflammation, and I have enough T-regs to maintain balance. These T-regs work with our mucosal membrane to keep this balance, and help us repair our mucosal membrane. And so that's sort of this complex interaction in our gut and all our mucosal linings. My first talk, I talked a lot about the mucosal membrane. But the most important thing about today is the balance. And so when we're trying to figure out who is the perfect host for any type of virus or bacteria, they'll find it easier to cause an infection when we don't have very good mucosal support. Because if they can find a situation where the body favors a little bit more inflammation, it's much easier to sneak by and cause more problems. It's much easier to sneak in through past a mucosal layer and push, basically take over and cause infections. When patients have an imbalance in their immune system and they don't have important mucosal layers of support, their immune responses tend to be hyper. So they're hyper responsive, hyper vigilant, because they don't have the T-regs to put the brakes on this inflammation that gets started because of this imbalance. And so it's really important to have this balance and to have the T-regs to put a brake on that hyper responsive reaction. That's important with the coronavirus because the coronavirus is going to mess with this. And that's sort of what gets us in trouble. So that's the person who is going to be most at risk of getting a corona infection, is somebody who doesn't have this balance, who doesn't have good mucosal membranes, who doesn't have enough T-regs. And so that makes partly what makes a good host is not enough T-regs to put brakes and balance in our immune system, and not enough mucosal membrane to sort of buffer the entry of the virus into our bodies. And so that's the first part I'm going to cover. Second part we'll go into is we're going to talk about access and this special spike protein. Can you push stop? Will we get that?